Hi, everyone. This is James. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Level Up. Um, I just ended my recording here with Monte Pedersen. I keep telling people that he is our secret weapon. He is, he's my coach behind the scenes. And I've really taken that to heart that every great leader still needs a coach. If you're the top leader in your organization, you especially need a coach. And Monty has been so generous, so kind, beyond the working, paid relationship that we have together in the actual work that he does, which we get incredible value for. But beyond that, I really have enjoyed the kind of personal value that Monty has created for me in my life, personally and as a leader. This episode is awesome. There are things that we dug into that were planned, topics of conversation. But as with all conversations that I have with Monty, they always take a life of their own and explore interesting comments and crevices that I wasn't expecting. I always have insight when I talk to Monty, and so that's why he's coming back on as a guest a second time. So I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that it makes you think about and reflect on your role as a leader in managing execution of your strategy. Not just formulating a strategy, not just having one, but really doing the hard grunt work of teaching your organization how to execute. Everything has to align in such a way that the mission and the vision and the core parts of your ethos of the business has to line up to your strategy and how you execute and how you align people to do that. And then it has to align to what you do day to day, week to week, month to month. So anyway, we explored a lot of that in this conversation. I also talked about things that'll probably get me canned for more senior living conferences and speaker stages, but I hope not. I hope that these are empowering things that lead to conversations of consequence. And if we have meaningful conversations, then we can actually get to some results. So here's my second episode with Monte Pedersen. Enjoy. Hi, listeners. I am really excited to bring Monty back to Level Up. Monty, not only were you my first true guest of Level Up back in April of 2021, you are my first returning guest.
Wow, all kinds of firsts.
You
That's good.
you clearly hold a special place in my life, Monty. It's funny to think about how our, friendship and working relationship kind of grew over some LinkedIn engagements many years ago. And it's a funny thing. We don't engage on LinkedIn as much these days, which is something I want to talk to you about. But I love how this has developed over the years. And I'm really excited to explore the concept of strategy and execution. And you have a really interesting perspective of my work in a way that almost nobody else really does. So I thought you'd be a really helpful mirror moment for me as well. But I just have enjoyed working with you these last couple of years, and I want to tell more people about it.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate hearing that, James, because I've enjoyed our relationship, and it's interesting to think back on how it came together. But I think it's a testament to the power of networking
Yeah.
and the fact that technology can bring people together. Not only obviously we're both in the States.
Hmm.
And we should tell people we have met personally
We
more than
have
once.
twice. Yeah.
But it just tells you what the possibilities are,
Yeah.
just in terms of friendships and networking and business
Yeah.
interests and just really being a support for each other. I think that's what's critical to know.
Yeah, it really is incredible to think about. A lot of people will ask me, is LinkedIn worth it, and why do you invest so much time into it? And there's a group of people that are clear indicators for me of my life, my work, and therefore the impact of my work is so much better as a result of these relationships. And still vastly the majority of connections that we make are pretty casual in nature. But there's a select few in my life, I'm sure in yours as well, that have gone to something much more impactful. I'm curious about that for you, Monty. If you have, are there people that you have met through LinkedIn or other virtual means that have become a pretty important part of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably, probably close to a dozen
Yeah.
or
Wow.
so if I were to count them up. But
Mm-hmm.
most recently, along the lines of my strategy execution work,
Mm-hmm.
um, I've worked with a colleague in Switzerland who was interested in the same subject, another
Yeah.
consultant, and we built a we built a process, co-created it called
Yeah.
STEP, and we've actually um, held classes online and started teaching it to organizations because it I don't want to jump ahead of the conversation here, but suffice
Mm.
it to say is there's this gap between strategy and execution, and that
Mm-hmm.
seems to be the biggest challenge for people is understanding how do I, I mean, obviously I have to have a good strategy, but how do I
Mm-hmm.
take that good strategy and how do I get it to the results? And STEP is it fills in the blanks. That's what
Mm.
that was designed for, to kind of shortcut people to how to get to the results.
Yeah.
So, because not everybody's willing to do what you've done in terms of Keenlink and
Mm-hmm.
really taking a deep dive into strategy execution. So
Yeah.
that's what STEP was created for. And anyway, and that was
Mm.
through a colleague in Switzerland. So
Yeah. Well, I love the evolution of not just your work with trying to fill that gap between strategy and execution, and that, by the way, it really comes through in your work, in your content, in like the ethos of Monte Peterson. I think about, well, what does Monty do? And if I were to give a short answer for everybody else, it's that you teach people how to get from strategy to execution. And I mean, I would be so lucky if somebody could articulate about me a very similar, like clear note about, oh, what does James do? And if they gave as succinct of an answer, I think I would be doing a much better job. But yeah, when it comes to execution, you're the person I think of. You're the person I go to, and I can't wait to kind of unfold that a little bit for the listeners and share a little bit of what concrete things have actually happened in that work, and not just give platitudes toward one another. But what you were just talking about of your own execution has evolved over the years. It started with something and it moved to something else, like Step and your partner there in Switzerland. So I'm curious for your own reflections about being a practitioner of execution and not just a teacher of it.
yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and so
Hmm.
when you go into it, you see it and you say, "Gosh, this is really important." I mean,
Hmm.
there isn't anything more important than getting to the results, and
Yeah.
people don't really know how to do that. Now they make these assumptions, right, about, well, here's our challenge and here's what we provide, and we go out and
Hmm.
we do it, and that, at the end of the month of the year, the collective outcomes, are your results. But it's so much deeper than that in terms of how you do that, because most people, most strategies end up failing, and the
Hmm.
primary reason, well, there's actually two primary reasons. One is you have a bad strategy, you just never get out of the starting gate, and then number two, you just don't have a detailed plan for your strategy for how you get there, and that's what execution centers on, and that's really what I've focused on over the last 8 years, and really even more intensively the last 3 or 4, is really what are the conditions, what causes great execution to occur, and that's
Mm.
that's really where I've been spending most of my time, and gaining really a PhD's worth of knowledge, in terms
Yeah.
of how to do that with people and organizations.
Monty, why do you think most people are bad at strategy? Like the idea and the concept of strategy itself. We'll get to execution. I've had a lot of revelations in this camp of thinking as a result of our work. But I'm curious for you, why do you think most people are bad at strategy?
Um, I don't think it's intentional, but well, maybe it is. Um,
Hmm.
but but to me, strategy and execution, again, they're codependent, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it takes a lot of work, and you need them both to be successful in business. But I think the problem is people don't understand the level of work and commitment that it takes to
Yeah.
to get to the results, because you can probably attest from your own experience.
Hmm.
You put an awful lot of time into it, and it requires a significant investment in people, and working with people is, as you know, is pretty messy. It's so much easier just to take a plan and then tell people what it is that you think they need to do. You mandate things, and to a certain extent some of that can happen, um, especially from good leadership that knows where it's going and has a clear-eyed diagnosis of what it wants to do. But for the
Yeah.
most part, that's not how it works, because what happens is you if you're the president, or the manager of your department or whatever it is, you go to your
Hmm.
key people and you basically tell them what the organization's trying to do, and then it's just left to their own devices. You're really at the mercy
Totally.
of their experiences and what they can do, and that's usually where it fails. And so things don't get translated effectively. People just, they have a job description, they do their job responsibilities, and they think if they need to know more, somebody's going to tell them.
Yeah.
So you don't
Mm.
you don't get intuitive execution. You don't get to the results. In fact, most of the time we want to forget about the year we've just had because the results suck so bad. We
Hmm.
can't wait to just jump into the new year and start talking about something new. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a long-winded answer. There's a lot of elements to it, but primarily it's the work and just not understanding what it takes to execute successfully.
Yeah, totally understand and feel that. And if you have a vague concept of strategy, then you're never really accountable for it. You're never really at fault for it if you've never had to clearly articulate strategy. So I'm gonna give a bad answer or a bad example of strategy, part in part to just make your skin crawl as a strategy professional. But I also want to make clear for people what bad strategy might sound and feel like. And so here's my version of bad strategy, Monty. And I'm gonna take senior living as an example. It's our profession. So this is typically what I hear about as strategy. Our strategy as XYZ Senior Living Company is that we're going to be the best, we're going to be the brightest. We're going to provide the most excellent care for our seniors. And we're going to have um, excellence and compassion, and our values are going to come through. That is our strategy to make XYZ Senior Living the best possible company we could be. Did I do a pretty good job of articulating a bad strategy?
You did an excellent job,
All right.
because it doesn't get any warmer or fluffier than that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I got to tell you, Monty, that is base. It sounds so comedic to me now that I've really dug into and understood and try to get into this. But I can't tell you how often I've heard some version of that as this is our strategy. It's a, what do they call it? A nothing burger?
yeah, a total nothing burger, and generally they're just, like I shared, they're warm and fuzzy, public-facing statements that sound nice and look good hanging on your wall, but no one pays any attention to them, and they don't have any value or meaning to any of the
Yeah.
stakeholders involved in senior living.
There's no way to actually tell if you're executing that or not. It's just and by the way, all of the other kind of interrelated parts of strategy, which might be culture and initiatives and core values and behaviors, these all become even fluffier extensions of a poor strategy. And so then you get core values and behaviors and mission statements and vision statements that all just don't feel like they have any real connection in place. And I realized that having a bad strategy or not really understanding what it is, it completely sets up everything else to fail by association.
It does. It does, because if you don't have a cohesive set of actions that are understandable and applicable and easy to learn,
Hmm.
people aren't just going to get it, and so
Yeah.
they just sort of smile and say, "That's nice," or that sounds good, or if they ever have to give a marketing pitch, they kind of know what to say.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
terms of delivering on,
Mm.
what it is you want to do, for your residents, for your families, for your community, it has no staying power, none of it.
Yeah. I have a possible theory about this, Monty, and I'm gonna preface that this is gonna make me sound very pessimistic in nature, but it all moves to something that I hope is a little bit more actionable. But the theory that I have about this, Monty, in our field of senior care, senior living, is that I actually think that the heads of organizations are pretty good at strategy, and they know and can articulate their strategy, but that they have to give a marketing version of it, because the true nature of most senior living businesses, which I believe is a real estate strategy, and not a caregiving strategy, you can't tell that down the road. You can't actually tell other people in your organization who are caregivers at heart. They're not real estate professionals. They're not um, private equity. The people doing the work of senior living, they can't be told what the actual strategy of the organization is. Otherwise, they would be completely turned off by it. So you have to give a fake glossy marketing version of it, which is, we're going to be the best care providers, we're going to be the best workplace, and it's a nothing burger, because their actual strategy, which they think about and articulate internally with the decision makers, of, okay, we're going to acquire X amount of businesses, and we're going to use the real estate value that is created from that to leverage more purchases and more acquisition, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There probably is a strategy that they know and are trying to execute at the high level, but the problem is you can't sell that down the road. And so that's why I think we get a lot of glossy versions of strategy, um, because you can't actually tell people in your company that the thing that you're selling is not actually the core business.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, and you probably just dismissed yourself from the speakers list of the next several conferences
Probably, yes.
by articulating that. But yeah, because in essence, a lot of
Mm,
organizations, and maybe here is a good time to have it to identify the demarcation between ownership and operators,
yeah, yeah,
because essentially that may be the ownership model and that may be the funding mechanism, which is fine. There are obviously a lot of organizations that do that, and then the operational model is really the cash flow, that
yeah,
helps fund the additional investments. And so
yeah,
really, economics aside, if you're if you're a potential client or resident or family, you really want to look away from that model. You really want to
hmm,
look towards, really, are who are the people, and what are they committed to doing, and are they
yeah,
passionate about what they do, and then what are their methods and
yep,
and practices. So yeah, it's a tough it's a tough distinction to make, but from an
hmm,
economic standpoint, people aren't pe- people in that business don't start out as senior living experts, right?
yep,
That they're
yeah,
looking at trying, they see a demand, in the graying of America or a particular area, and they think that this is an option
yep,
for people, and so that'll be in demand. So we need to meet this need, and that's how it's looked at. All of the other details are for somebody else to deal with.
yeah. That's exactly right. And Monty, you're right. I haven't been getting as many invitations to speak at conferences these days, but that's why the podcast exists, and that's why Think Tank exists. And um, you know, I got to say, it is a little bit of an uncomfortable prospect, um, leaning into what people might describe as thought leadership, which really I define as it's content. It's an umbrella. It's underneath the umbrella of content marketing, and it really is about taking a stand for or against something in the pursuit of some kind of a tangible change. And you know, and I think, by the way, this is why LinkedIn is becoming more and more critical and more important. I will tell you that at Bella Groves, we have more family members than I've ever experienced in any other aspect of my career that actually connect with me on LinkedIn and have researched us based on following me on LinkedIn to decide, are we going to move forward with Bella Groves or not? And I look at, executives across our industry, and while I've met them, I know them, not all of them, but I have been introduced to and know enough senior leaders within this industry, and their LinkedIn presence does not reflect, good, bad, or otherwise, it does not reflect their inner thinking. It does not reflect, what their beliefs are. I think that they certainly do a good job of representing their organizations well. But if you go and find the top 20, senior living operators and senior living by size anyway, not by anything other than that. But if you were to go look up the CEO and the C-suite and executive team of the top 20 biggest operators in senior living, and you follow them on LinkedIn, it would be hard for me to determine, what do you believe that your competitors don't? What is your theory? What is your hypothesis that is different from everybody else's? What do you stand for that maybe you might be putting your neck out on the line a little bit? I couldn't tell you that because they don't offer that presence. Some do. I think there are a few that do a good job of that. But anyway, I think all of these things are reasons that a lot of people don't talk about it. And if we come back to this idea about strategy and execution, there's almost a disincentive to teach your middle management what true strategy is, because they will start wondering and questioning, well, what is the strategy of our company?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're those CEOs, those people that you're mentioning, and while I have to applaud them for going out on social media, they're baked into this idea of an old operating model that basically says this is how the business is run, and this is how we're going to do it, and that's why you see that's why it's the sea of sameness, right?
Yeah.
They here's what they fail to understand is that things move at such a fast pace these days that competitive advantage has taken on a new meaning, and it has sort of reared its head in the form of organizations like Bella Groves, who have just taken a different approach. That they've been down that path and said, this isn't really what the future is going to demand. This, not only from an organizational standpoint, from an employee standpoint, and from a family member standpoint.
Yeah.
People aren't going to continue to work for organizations that are in that sea of sameness. Now they may be big enough for a while. Their size and their volume may sustain them for a period of time, but over time, and I think it's going to be a quick number of years, you're going to see more people saying, there's got to be something better than this,
Yeah.
And end of life and senior years can't be taken advantage of in this way.
Yeah.
And that's the model that people, not only from a shareholder's perspective, but that's the model that everybody's probably going to move to. It's just, I grew up in a generation where, my parents worked for, one employer for 30, 35 years. But the reason they could do that was things didn't change all that fast.
Right.
Right. You could go decade after decade and you could make incremental improvement, and that was fine. Now, change happens in minutes, if not hours and minutes. Right. And we have to be prepared for that, and technology is driving a lot of it. So
Yeah.
you know, thus you have caregiving at a level that nobody ever thought possible, and obviously, Bella Groves is out there, proving it. So um,
Yeah.
that's where it's headed, and I think that's the difference in what you're seeing, from the top providers to, who's out there really setting the pace for what senior living and healthcare even is going to look like in the future.
Yeah. I agree with you, Monty. I do see the undercurrent of frustration of our profession, and most of it you can sense on LinkedIn. And I think that's the value of putting content out there that stands for something. And the truth is, I don't stand against things as much as I stand for things. And I think people who can differentiate the two really understand that while some things that I talk about may sound pessimistic in nature, what I'm really pointing to is something of more optimism and positivity. Um, I think that we've got massive amounts of talent in our industry, in our profession, and I think there's enough frustration with the status quo, and people are leveling up on their own. They're learning, and they're getting wise to what's really going on. And I think that there's this cultural shift, and in the post-pandemic era, I think it's even more pronounced. I think that there's a bigger and bigger wave of people feeling like I don't want to spend the remaining years of my career serving something that I now realize what the Wizard of Oz is. I've seen behind the curtain a little bit more now, and I think that that is the groundswell of some frustration that I see, and part of how I know that that's true is when I make a post that is a little bit on that edge of there are things I post and I'm nervous about of like, well, that's probably another invitation to an event that I'm not going to get. But the response I get from that, not just people who engage, but more so private messages that I get. Because if you work for that type of company, Monty, you're not going to like my post, you're not going to comment on my post. But I get a lot of private messages from people saying something to the effect of, I didn't realize there were other people who felt this. Thank you for saying it. And essentially what they're saying is I can't engage with you publicly, but thanks for saying this. And then they'll give me part of their thought. But if nothing else, LinkedIn and content and thought leadership has given me a pulse of what people are really feeling. And it gives me more encouragement to keep going with our strategy and to get really good at executing that strategy, because it will do one of two things. It'll either bring great talent to our organization at it, as we grow, or two, it'll inspire other people to break off and do their own thing or transform their organizations in a way. I don't want Bella Groves to be the outlier. In fact, I want to, in some ways, cannibalize the main part of what our industry has been, which is senior housing. In fact, a good portion of our profession literally calls it senior housing. And so you don't really have to look far to find out what the strategy is. It is housing, it is real estate based, it is it's tax advantages of having real estate. And one employer that I worked with before, their top leader, the owner of the business essentially, he told me, he was like, when I was kind of learning more about the job, he's like, yeah, what we're doing is we're going to go acquire stressed assets. We're going to go buy underperforming communities. We're going to infuse a little bit of capital, and we're going to turn that around. We're going to improve the cash flow, and then we're going to go acquire more distressed properties. And that's our strategy. That never got articulated outside of that table, right? So everything that this person said in team meetings and company meetings, he rewrote the mission statement of the organization pretty much overnight, and then pitched it to everybody of like, hey, last night I wrote a new mission statement, and I'm wondering, and I would love everyone's feedback. And there is no clearer example for me of exactly what we're talking about than this real world example. And I thought, man, what a microcosm of our profession at large, that these things have happened. And I guess at a certain point, Monty, I felt like I'm silently contributing to that status quo, or gonna actually go out on a limb and try to do something different?
Yeah. It's interesting, James, because if you look at if you go a little bit beyond the surface of what that gentleman described to you,
Hmm.
um, there's nothing wrong with buying distressed properties. There's nothing wrong with improving underperforming, senior living
Hmm.
centers. The part you're missing is, what's the value, right?
Hmm.
What is it that people get from that? And what I mean by
Right.
people are all the stakeholders, right? The employees, the
Right. Exactly.
the residents, the community. And when you lose that focus, then I think you're not living your values. You're not,
Yeah.
you're not
Hmm.
doing what you need to be doing. And so there's nothing wrong when the strategy, I mean, obviously we've got to make money to be successful, but when that becomes the sole driver of everything that you do, ultimately that model, won't succeed, because at a certain point in time, you'll commoditize it, and, you know, people will be coming in because you'll be underperforming, and they'll be looking to
Right.
acquire your property. So yeah,
Right.
it's
Right.
it's sort of self-fulfilling.
It is, and you're right, and it is something I try to come back to often. Of that, by the way, I never want to vilify revenue, operating margins, profitability. All of those things are not a bad thing. They're a good thing insofar as they serve the bigger mission of what you're trying to do. And I think the alignment of all of those things, mission, vision, strategy, values, behaviors, initiatives, all of those things should feel like they're a very cohesive, interconnected thing. And what is stark about the example I just gave to you is how incongruent they are. Here's the actual strategy. Here are stated values. Here are the initiatives that we're going to make people really pursue and put their work in. But the kind of jarring feeling of feeling the strategy, of not being able to hear the strategy, feeling the strategy, hearing the mission, being told what the stated values are of the organization. There are all of these disparities between that people who work in the profession, they don't know how to make sense of all of that. And I think that kind of internal, like, professional anxiety that builds up is what is wrong with me, or what's wrong with the organization. And more times than not, the people feel like something's wrong with them, so they'll go from one organization to another, to the next, to the next, feeling like something is wrong with the way that they are working. Because, gosh, if I keep going to different organizations and I keep failing for the same reasons, there must be something wrong with me. But I actually think it's a lot more to do with the systems that they're bouncing back and forth from. Because a lot of our profession, for better or for worse, we all know the lyrics to the song of senior care. And some people are true musicians who believe that and play the music, and then there are others who just memorize the words. And unfortunately, those are the ones that come out on the mission statements and posters and employee handbooks.
Yeah, a couple of really important points there, James. Those elements that you talked about, mission, vision, core values,
Hmm.
behaviors, um, those are what we call foundational elements, and you have to
Hmm.
establish those inside your organization. Why you have to establish them is because ultimately they drive culture.
Yeah.
That if people understand those, and they permeate throughout the organization, they should have enough from them to know how to lead and how to manage people. It doesn't mean
Right.
that they still don't get the day-to-day direction that they need on other things, but you've got to say, this is where we're grounded. This is what we're all about. We talked
Hmm.
about culture being an accelerator for strategy execution. Well, if you have all those elements in place, like, do you live your mission each day? Do you understand the vision, meaning you look out over the horizon and you know where the organization wants to be in 5 or 10 years? Do you have a strong set of core behaviors that everybody adheres to? And then do you have a
Mm.
strong set of strategic initiatives? If people understand those 4 parts by themselves, they know enough to guide their guide their leadership, guide their management skills, and their behaviors will be reflective of that. And
Yeah.
and that's just something that's that's really missing in most organizations. There's just such a huge disconnect, and so
Yeah.
when you come back to the idea of strategy execution, there is no one umbrella concept over a business that basically sets a plan in place for everything. Because if you don't have that, all you have is really what you reference. You just have a loose set of tools and processes that people kind of jog in and out of and use it sometime, but they don't understand, and they feel awkward, they feel incomplete, and it just doesn't lead anywhere. But when you can take strategy execution and align it with what you've done foundationally, then you always know what to come back to. Your path is going to be studied, and you're going to see progress, and you're going to make your way towards your overall objectives.
I love this. Culture accelerates strategy execution. I'm going to quote you on that, Monte. Those are 4 words strung together that I think really summarize, the last 15, 20 minutes here. I want to go back to, in this podcast episode, I would also like to have people come away with concrete things. And so earlier I gave a bad version of strategy. So, what's funny, Monty, is that in my own kind of, I do some limited coaching work throughout the year, still for other organizations. And in a lot of ways, I am channeling a lot of you and my own learnings. And I teach and I try to help other people with their strategy. So taking what I've learned, imparting it on others. And then that, of course, has the building effect of strengthening my own, understanding of it. So, I've often used a metaphor. I use metaphors a lot to help people conceptually think about and grab onto a topic that there has to be a reason it hasn't clicked for that person before. So I'll often do this where it's like, hey, let's get out of our industry for a minute and let's just try to understand the concept and then bring it back to apply to your business or our profession. So one of my go-to metaphors for strategy is, imagine that a plane has crashed on a deserted island, and that there are 2 factions that have come out from that plane. And basically, you have learned that there's going to be a rescue boat on the other side of the island in about 2 weeks. And but the thing is that rescue boat can only fit half of the people from the plane. So the 2 groups have to determine what is our best guess on how to be the first team there. And so one team, a leader rises kind of to the ranks and says, hey guys, it seems like we are all about all or nothing. We're all going to get there or nobody's going to get there. No person left behind. And so they form basically a mission and an ideal around that concept that hell or high water, we're all going to get there or we're all going to perish. And people can opt in or not into that mission, into those values and everything that comes from that. And then the other group says, guys, survival of the fittest here. We love people, we want to survive. And our values are really around this idea that for the greater good, for people to survive, that we are all agreeing, let's help each other out, but survival of the fittest. Let's get as many people to the finish line, even if that means a few of us don't make it. Now you've got mission, you've got some vision, you've got some values and behaviors that are starting to formulate around a belief system. Okay, that's not strategy. Strategy comes in with group 1, that is we're all going to make it or we're all going to perish. Our strategy is we're going to travel at nighttime. So what we're going to do is we're not going to travel during the hottest times of the day. It's very, very hot on this island. And so to improve our chances that we're all going to get there, we're all going to travel when it's coolest and it's going to be at dark. So based on that strategy, we're going to form groups that are going to do different things. So during the daytime, we're going to have a group that stays awake, looks for danger. We're going to have another group that collects water and food and supplies. And then otherwise, we're going to have another group that kind of schedules everything for us and says, all right, we need to start winding down activity. Everybody needs to go to sleep during the day. We need to get tools to help us sleep and block out the sun so that when it's nighttime, we're all going and we're going to go all night long. The other group has a different strategy that's slow and steady wins the race. So their strategy is if we make a little bit of movement all day and rest for short periods of time, we have the best chance to get everybody there, right? So now you've got two different belief systems, two different strategies or theories about how to get there first. And then execution is which one of it's not that one strategy is better than the other. It all comes down to how are you going to execute that strategy. So I use this deserted island plane crash metaphor, and for the vast majority of people, this helps like click for them.
Yeah, no, metaphors are especially helpful, and strategy, is very misunderstood. So a couple of things I would share in
Yeah.
response. Um, strategy is a starting point. So your plane has crash landed. You got to figure out what you're going to do. So basically, it's your best. What people don't realize is strategy is just your best case guess for how you
To get
win.
started.
Yeah, how you win on the playing field of your choice. Obviously, you're on this deserted island, and it's a life and death matter. So the decisions are obviously a lot more intensive. But anyway, so you've got that starting point, and then again you've got to have from an execution standpoint, you've got to have a clear-eyed diagnosis of your problem, and we want to get everybody in 2 weeks to the other side of the island where we can get rescued. So how do we do that? Well, we set a guiding policy, and essentially when you had the division of labor and however move at night versus moving during the day, you make all those decisions. But here's the thing that screws most people up with strategy again, is that you've got to have a set of cohesive actions that can be monitored, and you can measure progress, and you can adjust, because things are going to happen, right? People are going to get sick along the way. Someone's going to get bitten by a snake. So you've got all of these things that are going to compound and impact your direction, where you're going with your strategy. So you have to be prepared for that. And a lot of people look at strategy as just sort of set it. It's great. We believe in it. We love it at the top. And then they don't think it has to be managed, that they just hire smart people, and those smart people will make the right decisions and guide it to victory, if you will. And that's the farthest thing. So yeah, you've got to manage it all the way to the end, and you've got to have every person on your team aligned with what the objectives are of the organization. And again, this is just a lot of work, and most people don't have a system or process for doing that effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that. Continuing with the metaphor of the plane crash and getting to the rescue boat, a version of poor leadership in that would be if I was Group A's leader and I said, guys, this is the strategy. I'm going to go on ahead. I'll wait for you at the rescue site. So you guys have 2 weeks. Good luck. I hope I'll see you there. But here's the plan. Execute it, right? And I think about how often I've actually seen that of people aren't managing it. They don't have clear job descriptions. It's one of the things that in our work together, Monte, I have rethought, revised, and I think we're getting better and better at primary job responsibilities, PJRs. You would not believe how often we use the term or acronym PJRs at Bella Groves. But it gets to what you're talking about, which is you have to manage execution, and strategy is a starting point, not written in stone. It's your best guess. It's your best theory about how to get there and how to win. But if you're not monitoring how people's primary jobs are leading to that progress, right? Execution and measurements all have to let you know, do we have a winning strategy? And if we do, how do we enhance it? How do we accelerate it? Or do we have the measurements in place to tell us? And then do we have the objectivity to be able to determine, gosh, we picked a bad strategy? So, you know, realigning people to do the work to keep moving the group forward. It's the difference between whether your group's going to get there first or the other group's going to get there, because you can't observe what the other team is actually doing. You can only kind of look at your own internal controls and results. But I love this reminder of, it's not, you don't set it and forget it and say I'll see you at the end. You got to manage execution along the way.
You do, and how you manage it is through people, because when it comes down to it, organizations don't
Mm.
execute, individuals do. Now
Yeah,
you can always make
good
the
point.
case that in the aggregate, you can add up all the results and you can lay that at the feet of the leadership and the organization and say, this is what we accomplished. That's fine. But the reality is, it comes down to aligning the daily tasks and objectives of everybody on your team with the strategic objectives of the organization. And when you do that, when you've got
Mm.
everybody on the team committing themselves to getting something done that's in alignment with what they're doing at their level, which supports the next level, which supports the next level, right? In a
Right.
in a heavily hierarchical organization. But
Yeah.
the reality is, we're stronger as a full group operating competently than we are with just a few people here and there
Right.
operating competently. And
Yeah.
people miss that. And you know, I mean, it really irritates me, but most organizations don't set good goals. They don't even know how to write and develop good goals. And
Hmm.
one of the tenets of solid strategy execution, beyond primary job responsibilities, right? Primary job responsibilities govern the day-to-day behavior, right? Those critical things that the organization counts on you doing. But goals and tasks that are associated with them actually improve the organization. So
Right.
they go over and above your daily job responsibilities. And again, people don't see that, but everybody on your team should have a working set of PJRs, and they should also have a
Yeah.
set of goals that are commensurate with what the organization's trying to accomplish in that period of
Mm.
time. And
Yeah.
when you get all these forces working together, you get a tremendous energy, and people
Yep.
understand what they're doing. And you know when something is
Mm.
amiss, a manager or a leader knows to step in and pay attention to it and figure out a better way or a different way of doing it. And that type of activity throughout the course of a fiscal operating year for an organization is just embarrassingly absent.
Yeah. I this is so good. So I completely can internalize and see aspects of this within our own organization. About goals are really, really hard to write. We we often write goals, and I'm speaking personally, we often write goals from this trained thinking about, well, I'm gonna do really well in this responsibility. And that's basically what poor goals have come out to. Is it's just another way of talking about a responsibility that you have, and that, well, you're just going to do a better job of hitting that responsibility. But as you were talking, I wrote down, and I don't know if this is right, but next to writing good goals, I put, these are the unforeseeable value creation that I think a team member can contribute to an organization. Is we have a strategy, we have our values, we have responsibilities, but goals, I think, and I can look at things that have happened at Bella Groves, where a really well written goal, because you can exceed a goal, and part of writing a good goal is, what could happen if you exceed this goal? What's going to be the value to the organization? And I can look at a few examples of one of our team members who's responsible for creating connections within the community, the broader community of San Antonio. Um, she has far exceeded certain goals in the way that these community partners feel love and devotion to the cause, not just participating, but devotion. And so now we have like community garden plots. We have places that people are going to regularly and that their employees are forming deep relationships with our residents. We have new referral sources that we had no plans for, but a church that we regularly go and engage with this quilting activity, that person that person referred their neighbor to Bella Groves because of these experiences that are happening out in the community and with this church. So these are all unforeseeable value creation that has happened because this particular employee really understanding how her responsibilities fit into the strategy, she's been able to add value that we couldn't foresee when we initially wrote the goal.
Yeah, yeah. It should teach us, James, that you never know where a good idea is going to come from,
Mm-hmm.
and goals are a way for people to participate in the strategy, in the strategic success of the organization.
Mm.
You know, as employers, we bemoan the fact that it's difficult, to hire. It's a tight labor market, or there's just not enough good people, or nobody wants to work. We can use those excuses all day, but
Mm-hmm.
when you don't involve your people in what it is you're trying to accomplish, um, you're shortchanging them,
Yeah.
and you're
And the organization.
yeah. I mean, the way great strategy execution works is you want to empower your people at every level, which basically means you want to translate the strategy down at every level so people understand how it impacts them and
Yeah.
how they can contribute. Well, on top of that, leadership doesn't know everything, right? So there's missing pieces, and the people in your organization, all the way down to the front lines, they provide that information. So there's this natural feedback loop that you need to keep. And if you've got that going, where people have set goals and they're learning things from those goals, and then they're telling their
Yeah.
manager about their experiences, and that manager's going to the department head, and then the department head's going to the owner or whoever. That information is going back, and that's actionable intelligence. And people totally dismiss that. There's this historical view on leadership that everything needs to come and emanate from the top, right? That they're the all this is the green curtain Oz, right? The man pulling
Mm-hmm.
the levers, he'll make it happen, right? It doesn't happen that way. So
Yeah.
you've got to have that, that feedback coming from, because that's exactly what you want from it. You want somebody looking at it, recognizing that they are empowered to do things that can make a difference in the organization, make them simpler, make them more functional, make them more
Yeah.
practical, and do it. And shame on you if you're not allowing that to happen.
Mm-hmm. It is one of the things, Monty, that I have learned throughout this process of forming, creating, launching, the operating part of Bella Groves. One of my biggest lessons has been how to create these frameworks and conversations and knowledge base for people to contribute better ideas. And in year one, I formed almost independently, here's our strategy. Here are the things that we're going to do. I'm not entirely independently, but like my business partners and a few other members of our team early on, they certainly informed parts of it. But if I'm really being honest, I can look back and say, this is my idea. This is my thing. And then in the following year, when we were updating our initiatives, for the most part, I wrote most of those initiatives again. And this past year, when we because I think we've done a better job of our performance meetings every month, um, and the value of strategy execution has been deeply embedded in enough team members now that it's more than just a system, it's more than an obligation, it's a way of thinking and acting. And I think as a result of that, going into our team offsite strategy workshop, I was blown away by the level of contribution and understanding and the initiatives that we formed for 2025. I feel like they truly represent not just my own beliefs, but it represents things that they are excited about, and they themselves have been able to understand and articulate, oh, this is how we're going to drive that. So as an example, content marketing has become an important part of our execution of our strategy. And so in 2025, we're all going to be leaning more heavily into that. We're going to bring on the right partners to help us with that. We've all got our jobs. We've all got different versions of what we're going to do. But it all connects back to our bigger mission. And in our strategy, our kind of different view of everything than most of our competitors, our goal is to make caregivers better caregivers. That's the simplest way I can articulate what we believe that maybe not everybody else believes. And if they believe it, they haven't formed a company to execute on that. For us, we're going all in on how do we educate people? How do we transfer that knowledge? How do we get better at knowing whether or not that's worked? And so, because we've been able to articulate what we believe and we've formed strategic anchors around how we're going to get there, and then, like you said, we have to be able to translate that to every level. Not every level is going to know, understand, or be privy to every part of the strategy. We just have to make it relevant to every level in a way that, that they can take ownership of it. But like this example of content marketing and all the subsets of that, the initiative itself, the action items, the tasks, the things that we're all going to do, it is no longer James Lee is telling the organization this is going to be our focus next year. Everybody was part of truly creating that and internalizing it as why it's important to them individually. And I wasn't really good at it in the beginning, and I think I'm only starting to exercise that muscle now. But I think about the aggregate effect, Monty, of doing this year after year after year, of how much better our execution is going to be when there are handprints from other people in the organization that have formulated, adapted, improved our strategy.
Yeah, I think the key thing you've done there is you've communicated that they can have impact, that they can own a piece of this, and that you know you expect that out of them, and that's so much different than onboarding somebody and saying, here's your job description, here's the keys, here's what you're supposed to do. You can't manage people from a job description. You really can't. And if again, if you care about your people and let them know that they can have a hand in the success, probably 98 out of 100 times they're going to accept that and say, I'm in, and I appreciate that because you're hiring me for, you value me for what I can potentially do, and I'm going to live up to that and do well, and then hopefully you're going to do well by me. So
there are so many positive outcomes that have happened from this commitment to execution, that I wish, and actually in our monthly meetings together, I do share with you some of those beautiful outcomes and things and unexpected surprises. But just being a few years into Bella Groves, I articulated to my team not too long ago that I feel like the kind of view that I've had to be able to see as far out as I can see, I feel like I've kind of come up at the end of that, the edge of that, and that now we are all seeing it together at the same time. And I really mean that. Of course, there has to be somebody who sets a vision and a direction for the organization. And if I'm being honest, probably at the very beginning, I thought I'm going to be that visionary contributing leader forever and ever. And everyone will have to kind of rally around and believe this thing that I believe. And I wouldn't have known that until we went through all of this, that what feels really different and special about Bella Groves and what we're doing now is I don't think I'm standing on top of a mountain saying, look, this is where we're headed. I feel like we're all on that precipice together, and we're all saying, look what's ahead. And I still have a responsibility as a top leader in managing execution, but this idea of, like a Steve Jobs esque CEO leader who is the one visionary of the organization and everybody else just kind of fall in line behind them. I think in a way our industry, maybe culturally, we've adopted that false belief that there's this one charismatic visionary leader at every organization who's going to take you to the promised land. And it's circling back to, I think, a more honest and sincere way to serve and lead people is that you are serving the community of people engaged in the work rather than directing them. Here's my vision, go execute.
Yeah, I think what differentiates Abelli Groves from most any other organization out there is that you're willing to have conversations of consequence. When you talk about all of these elements, the content marketing, the social media, the practical application on the job, none of those things ever get perfected unless you're willing to have the hard and difficult conversations that get you to do them in the right way. And that's what I think that's what a good strategy execution framework does. It sets you up to engage with your people at a level and get them thinking really like they've never thought before. And that's when you begin to tap into the creative juices and people really look at this and say, this is really on me. I mean, I'm responsible and this is the expectation and I have clear guidance and I'm confident in what I'm going to do. I've been given the tools. I know where I can go for help when I need it and I can get that. But none of those things happen without negotiating hard conversations, at one time or another, because you get people in the wrong positions. Maybe you have, maybe people are not seeing the strategy. You've got to be able to expose that reality and then act on it. And most organizations aren't afraid to do that. They wait until it blows up internally, or it affects a customer in a really difficult way, and then you have to act at that point. So it really is reverse engineering everything almost in terms of how we think about it.
Yeah, you're right. It really is, and you get to see a little bit more of that in real time of this, I hope, and I'm curious for it, and I'm gonna ask to put myself on the hot seat here in a moment to get some of your own coaching summaries. The thing about the thing that I'm learning a lot about working here together is okay. I want to back up here. It was something that you were talking about of how everybody can get involved and become incorporated in the strategy. I wrote down it's the difference between a garnish and an ingredient. That a lot of ideas, a lot of things that people contribute to other organizations, it's a topping, but for us, what we're doing is we're converting that into an ingredient, that each person is contributing something in the middle in the creation process that there's then an output at the end of it, versus every idea I've ever contributed to other organizations, it's been a topping, it's a sprinkle, it's it's like throw some what is a kind of a common topping, cilantro or something, I don't know, put some greens on it to make it look nice. But you can't change the ingredients of this. There's a secret ingredient, we have it, and you guys can pick the topping. But here it does feel different, that people are contributing ingredients that are going to fundamentally change what the outcome is. So I think that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. people people think they can dress it up and make it right or make it work, and it doesn't take much digging behind that to find out what's really
Yeah.
happening, right? So,
Mm.
analogy
It's
well taken.
parsley was the thing I was thinking of, is that
Parsley, yeah.
it's like it's the universal garnish on almost every meal, at least in the senior living community, is chop up garnish and parsley and put it on the plate. So this is different. Monty, this has been amazing. Let's try to land the plane here for us.
Okay.
Um, do you have a few minutes still?
I have a hard stop at the bottom of the hour, so
Bottom of the hour.
yeah.
Okay. So we will let's wrap up here a little bit. I am curious for we've worked together over basically the entirety of Bella Groves in some way. We adopted the Keenlink system and started working with you more officially in the system maybe in the last 2 years, but had a lot of conversations before that. Um, what what have you observed? What have you observed of our organization? In my role in execution, not just the good stuff, not just the bad stuff, but I genuinely am curious from kind of a mirror moment here. What have you observed as we've worked together?
Probably probably the most important thing that I've seen with Belly Groves, and working with a lot of organizations with this system in strategy execution, is there are telltale signs of whether it's working well or not.
Hmm.
Um, Execution is one of those things, James, as you know, that, and you've experienced, that it can take you upwards of 2 or 3 years to get really good at it. And for some even longer. And I have clients that still struggle with it. But what I know from working with Belly Groves, why I know it's working is, all of a sudden my your reliance on me as a facilitator is lessened considerably. And
Hmm.
that tells me that you and your team have taken the reins of responsibility, and and you're working it through. I don't need to hold your hand much here in terms of what you're trying to do. And again, that's a great thing, because when we sit down and we have our monthly progress meetings, we're talking about the future. We're not talking about mechanics or what's happening
Mm.
inside the unit. So that's the number one thing that's happening. People are getting intuitive about execution. They feel empowered. They understand what we're trying to do, and they go out and they do it. And probably one of the more important things that happens with your team is, um, they're being reflective about their actions. That
Hmm.
they're really thinking about everything that they do, not just when they make a big mistake or they get called on something. They're thinking about it,
Yeah.
and they're coming probably to you, and their people are coming to them with recommendations and things to do to improve, because that's the that's the execution culture that you're establishing. That
Yeah.
people have a say, people have, and we want to know what's going on. We can't deliver at the level that we know we're capable of
Mm.
delivering at if we don't have that. So you just begin to see these things happen, that don't happen with a lot of other organizations, and that's those are very prideful moments for me, because
Hmm.
that's what I'm trying to do. And sometimes I reflect and say, am I doing a good enough job in terms of helping this organization
Yeah.
get there, because they're not seeing it.
Yeah. What a great way to think about our work together. I wrote down, every good coach works themselves out of a job, and I really can resonate with how you're reflecting on the progress at Bella Groves, and also the thing you said about individuals being reflective about their actions and consequences, and I see that too, more and more when we do the pre-score to our performance meeting. They are they're nearly identical. Good, bad, zeros, ones, the things that we want to talk about. How do we improve our working relationship? All of these prompts, yield very, very similar perspectives. And that has given me a lot of confidence that good, bad, or indifferent, we're all pretty much on the same page. And I think that gives me a lot of confidence that we're headed in a good track. I want to encourage my colleagues here in the senior living profession. First of all, if they have a chance to work with you, Monte, consider this an official endorsement of not just Monte, but the system of working together over the course of the 2 to 3 years. I think you're right on with that too, by the way, Monte. I conceptually understood what we've been talking about all these years, but I really didn't internalize it until the 2 to 3 years of work that we've done together. So I would absolutely say that's one thing that we've learned is you don't get good at strategy by understanding it conceptually. You get better at it by executing strategy. And number two, I talk to a lot of my colleagues in the profession that feel that they have an idea of strategy and how to execute, but nobody else in their organization does. So I think it's a good starting point, and I'm so grateful that I met you and that we've formed a working relationship together. But I can tell you, Monte, you have made an impact here in our organization, and maybe they don't know your name and they don't know what you do for us and for me specifically, but your impact is felt here. And you came out in December of 2022 when we were doing our kind of first big open house type thing. So you saw us before we really opened and launched. I'd love to invite you back and see some of the fruit of your labor. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for sharing that. And realistically, that's what it's all about. We need to elevate leaders and inspire them and empower them to serve others and to because this is to me this is an economic thing, right? That when you can provide for your people and give them something good that they can get their arms around with and be successful at, that has a downstream effect on society. They go home more fulfilled and treat their family better, and they're able to hopefully make a great salary and buy the things that they want for themselves and for their family and their children's children. So there's this huge effect from doing it. So I'm glad to see that that it works, because that every leader should be looking at their role in that way. If we really think about why we work and how we're going to lead fulfilling lives as individuals.
Yeah, it is in a way to kind of have this cosmic impact, in a way that you really don't see the exact effects of your ripples. You just have to trust that they are there. So I'm excited to invite you back when your schedule allows, Monte, to come back and visit with us at Bella Groves. Thank you so much for being my first guest, my first return guest, and there's a good chance there's going to be a part 3 somewhere down the road. But I really enjoyed having this conversation with you and sharing it with others. Thanks for making time to do it.
Thanks, James. I look forward to that.
Yeah. For all of our listeners here, hope you enjoyed the episode. Connect with Monte on LinkedIn, which is the way that I met him. And we'll include some links to website and other things so you can get to know Monte if you'd like to reach out to him. But for now, I hope you're leading well and that you're living your legacy today, and make it a great one. Thanks. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Level Up Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and its YouTube channel. Better yet, share it with someone you know who is on their own leadership development journey. I hope you'll be back for the next episode of Level Up. But until then, I hope that you are leading well, and remember that you are living your legacy today. So, make it a good one.